SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Good morning and welcome to another lecture of this course Philosophy of Architecture. Today we will have lecture number 14 and the title of today's lecture is Thing, Locale and Site. In this lecture we would cover difference between thing, locale and site, relationship between locale and space, the relationship between man and space, and double space making of admitting and installing. This will be a little difficult lecture, just the way the previous couple of lectures have been. Because in last few lectures we are discussing essence of dwelling and in the process also essence of building, and we have also seen that how building and dwelling leads to thinking, and if they lead to thinking, do they also lead to living or do they lead to being? These are the questions we have been discussing in the last few lectures. In this course we have come a long way. We began with what is architecture, the definition of architecture, the task of architecture, and how various architects have defined the field of architecture. And then we moved to Vitruvian concepts of architecture, which began in the 1st century AD, and we also saw Indian and Chinese view of architecture through their text called Mansara and Ingzao Fashi. Later on, we saw how different philosophers have made statements and understood this field of architecture and how they have defined and if not directed or influenced this field of architecture. We have also seen statements or conceptions given by philosophers like Hegel, like Schopenhauer, like Kant, like Wittgenstein, who have in their own way interpreted architecture. We have also seen various architects like Robert Venturi, Le Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe, and so many others who have through their buildings, through their designs, they have communicated a certain way of life, a certain way of thinking. We have also gone through the conversation between the philosopher Jean Baudrillard and Jean Nouvel, one philosopher and another architect, and through them and through their conversation and interviews, we have seen how creating singular objects of architecture has become so difficult because of the Disneyfication and because of the overwhelming impact of culture. In last few lectures, we are dealing with, as I said, essence of building, dwelling and thinking. And we are doing this with the help of essay by Martin Heidegger of this name, Building, Dwelling, Thinking. Today's lecture, as I have said, is on thing, locale and site, and this would be the last lecture on essence of dwelling. So let us move forward and see what is in store for us in this lecture. Now, before we go to thing, locale and site, I would like to revisit the idea of dwelling that we have been discussing and trying to understand over last 3 lectures. So, dwelling, in German the words are wohnen or wohnen, and it means to reside or stay, to be at peace and to be brought to peace. So, dwelling means to be at one place and be at one place in peace. That is a meaning of dwelling. And then if we look at the word for peace in German, because we are handling the ideas through the way we approach and understand ideas through German language, because Heidegger himself was a German and he wrote in German. So, let us look at the word for peace, and the word for peace in German is Fried, and which means free. So, being at peace means being free. To be brought to peace means freedom is being brought to you. To be at peace means to be free. And then there is another word which is a derivative of this word Fried, and that is frei. And that frei means preserved from harm and danger. So, being free actually means being preserved from harm and danger, preserved from something which is dangerous. And when we are preserving something, from harm and danger, what we are actually doing is we are safeguarding it. Alright. And when we are safeguarding, why are we safeguarding? What are we safeguarding for? So, to spare it for something else. So, to free also has a sense of to spare or sparing. So, indirectly we are reaching this idea of sparing. To dwell, to be set at peace means to remain at peace within the free sphere that safeguards each thing in its essence. So, I hope you are able to appreciate the subtlety and the abstractions involved in understanding the idea of not just dwelling, but the essence of dwelling, which is actually safeguarding the thing in its essence. So, when we are dwelling, we are safeguarding ourselves in our essence. That is the point that we must understand as we try and go by this lecture or this idea of building, dwelling and thinking. So, the fundamental character of dwelling is this sparing. This sparing must be understood, because if you are dwelling, you are actually sparing yourself and you are safeguarding yourself in your essence. So, dwelling is in its whole range the stay of mortals on the earth. We have also seen previous lecture on fourfold and how the four folds of earth and sky, divinities and mortals, and preserving of that fourfold in oneness is actually dwelling. So, that element also we must keep in mind when we move forward. So, before I move forward to locale, thing and site, I want you to take a look at this bridge once again, this picture, and look at it a little closely. What happens when there is a bridge across a stream? What happens to the people who are crossing this bridge? What happens to the landscape that is around the bridge? What happens to the banks that become banks when there is a bridge? So, think about this idea of a bridge carefully, deeply, contemplate it as we move forward, because we are going to take bridge as an example to understand the ideas of thing, locale and site. So, what is a built thing? I mean, we are trying to understand what is a bridge and what is bridge as a thing. We are not looking at the idea of building here in the abstract sense. We are trying to understand building or a built thing in the sense of construction. If you remember, we were discussing that how the idea of building contained the idea of dwelling and construction and cultivation, but this idea of dwelling has fallen off, and today we associate building only with cultivation and construction. So, today in this lecture, while we try and understand what is bridge as a built thing or what is a built thing, today we are limiting our discussion to built thing in the sense of constructed things. So, we will now discuss bridge as a thing or bridge as a built thing. Now, a bridge is generally over a gap, a chasm, a stream or something which is a gap over which a bridge has to be built. So, bridge, if we assume that it is over a stream, bridge swings over the stream. Alright. So, it's a beautiful way of saying that bridge swings. So, the fall, the arch, the travel actually is like a swing. So, bridge swings over the stream with ease and power. Why ease and power? Because it is unhindered. Suppose you are crossing a river and you come from one side and move to the other side, you just smoothly go on. You don't really feel any obstruction. So, with ease, you move to the other side, and also with power. Power because you experience the power of this construction, that no matter how heavy you are or how heavy your vehicle is, it just goes to the other side. So, bridge itself is heavy. Bridge is not a light structure, especially when it is in the cities or when it is large bridges. So, it swings over the stream with ease and power. Then banks emerge as banks only as the bridge crosses the stream. So, imagine if there is no bridge across the stream, then it is just a simple plain stream going across the countryside or the city. But when you build a bridge, when there comes a bridge at some location on the stream, suddenly you realize that there are banks. Banks on this side of the stream, this side of the river, and the other side of the river. So, banks emerge as banks only when the bridge crosses the stream. People get to other banks, and in the end, as mortals, to the other side. So, what really happens in a bridge? We go with the help of bridge from one side to the other side, from one bank to the other bank. And as mortals, because when we are talking of dwelling, we are also talking of being on earth as mortals. So, when we are on earth as mortals and when we have to travel to the other side, there is a bridge of death. So, the other side is perhaps divinities or sky, and we travel to the other side with a metaphorical bridge called death. So, that is also a bridge, and the life is like a stream. Another element that we must think about when we think of a bridge is a bridge gathers the earth as landscape around the stream. So, when the stream is going on and moment you put a bridge, everything around that bridge actually becomes a landscape, and all that is around the bridge is gathered by the bridge and convert that into a landscape. So, so that this gathering that bridge is able to do, the gathering of nature, gathering of earth around the bridge becomes a landscape, and this conversion of earth or the surroundings into landscape is a contribution made by bridge. Also, notice what happens when a stream is running under the bridge. If you stand on the bridge and from one side you see that the water is flowing in, and from the other side you see water is flowing out, and for a moment you feel that bridge is holding the flow of the stream for a moment, and then it sets it free once more. So, this holding is almost not only beautiful, but it is as if it is holding the life for a moment and then letting it free. So, bridge also performs that function of holding life for a moment, holding the flow of life for a moment and then setting it free once more. Bridge lets the stream run its course and at the same time grants mortals their way. Now, in the bridge, two simultaneous movements happen, both perpendicular to each other. Because of the bridge, stream is running its course and mortals are also able to cross the stream. So, both of them are going their way simultaneously, and it happens because of the bridge. So, simultaneously bridge is allowing two or more functions. Another element we can see is what kind of bridges we wish to consider. So, there are bridges in the city and then there are bridges in the countryside. Right in the middle, nowadays, not nowadays, I mean it has been historically true that a large number of cities historically have come up on the riversides, and as technology evolved, we started making bridges across the river. Most major cities in the world you would see are on the banks of river, and on those rivers there are not one but several bridges within the city. So, you will see that the city has developed on either side of the river, and you cross the river through various bridges on every side, whether you take the river Thames in London or you take river Hooghly in Calcutta. It is easy because there are so many bridges, it is easy to cross from one side to the other. And you will see that on either side of the bridge, the character of the city is different. If the bridge is in countryside, in the countryside, you either the bridge is on a stream or either bridge is on a valley, and you move from one kind of location to another. So, you may go from home to market, you may go from office to office, and so on. So, this is how we can also look at bridge as a built thing. Instead of looking at bridge in terms of dimensions, that it is so many meters long or it is so heavy and it is a cantilever bridge or it is a pillared bridge, it has so much of density of vehicles passing through it every day. In terms of numerical figures, in terms of dimensions, we can look at, but we can also look at bridge in this form, where what we are doing is its phenomenological analysis, when we try and understand how bridge and what bridge means to us as mortals. And here, since we are discussing bridge in the sense of constructed entities and bridge as a thing, I must also say that thing in the ancient German language is called gathering. The word for gathering and the word for thing in ancient German is the same or is similar. So, what I am trying to say is that when you think of any structure as a built thing, you must think of the idea of gathering. What does it gather around itself so that it becomes a thing? Let us move forward. So, Heidegger in his essay distinguishes between these three terms, thing, locale and site. And how do these three ideas differ, these three concepts differ, and what do they mean really in the context of dwelling and perhaps in the context of architecture. So, things are locales that allow a site for the gathering of fourfold. Now, let us pay attention to what is being said here. In one word, in one sentence rather, you have all three words mentioned, all three concepts mentioned in this one and first sentence. Things are locales that allow a site for the gathering of fourfold. So, thing, locale and site, all three are in this sentence. Just now we have done a discussion on what is a built thing. So, bridge is a thing, and what he is saying is things are locales. So, things become a locale, alright. We must understand it this way. Things become a locale when they allow a site for the gathering of fourfold. So, things are locales that allow a site for the gathering of fourfold. So, building becomes a locale, alright. So, building is a thing and it becomes a locale when it allows a site for the gathering of fourfold. So, a site, alright, a site where the bridge is built or a location where the bridge is built, it becomes a site when there is a gathering of fourfold. So, earlier we had talked about gathering of the landscape, gathering of the earth around the bridge so that it becomes a locale. Now, here what we are saying is that when a thing allows the location where the thing is located, if it allows a gathering of fourfold, it becomes a locale. Bridge gathers, second point, bridge gathers the fourfold in such a way that it becomes a site. So, essentially the same thing, that if bridge is able to gather the fourfold around it, it becomes a site. So, I hope you can see the difference between bridge and site, and in between location. Bridge in the sense thing, site in the sense where fourfold is gathered, and location is bridge becoming a location for the fourfold to unfold. So, bridge makes one spot along the stream a locale, and so locale comes into being. So, when you take a stream and stream goes on from one place to another for a long distance, however, bridge is made at one spot along the stream. It cannot be made at many spots, it is made at only one spot. So, the spot where the bridge comes up, that spot, bridge makes one spot along the stream a locale, and so locale comes into being. So, that one spot across the stream where bridge happens, that one spot becomes a locale. Let us move forward. So, locale admits and installs the fourfold. So, we have seen that and let us look at the first point. Things are locales that allow a site for the gathering of fourfold. So, locale becomes a site for the fourfold when it allows the gathering of fourfold. So, when it allows, what does it do? Allowing means what? Allowing the fourfold to happen, allowing the fourfold to be gathered, allowing the fourfold to be gathered in oneness and then unfolding. What does it mean? It means that the fourfold is admitted and fourfold is installed. So, you are allowing someone inside and you are installing that person or that thing inside. So, admitting and installing. Please understand these two sense of welcoming. Allowing or admitting someone inside, allow someone to come in and install. So, fix, establish. So, locale admits and installs the fourfold. So, think about this these terms, admitting and installing. It is also called double space making, which we will see in future. So, now what we have to see is relationship between locale and space. Now, all of it, thing, locale and site, all of it is happening in space. So, can we explore the relationship between locale and space? If you remember, we have also come across this term space or ROM when we were discussing the architecture of Adolf Loos, when he made the plan called ROM plan, and he said that he does not think of building as ground floor, first floor, second floor. He thinks of them as cubes of varying heights. So, this is where we had earlier encountered this word ROM, and today once again we will see how we can relate it to ideas that we are discussing today of thing, locale and site. So, what we are trying to do is find relationship between locale and space, space which is also ROM. So, space is something that has been made room for. So, please understand and try and get the sense of it, the abstraction of it, that space is something that has been made room for. Okay, so, you have made room for something, and that something is space, something that has been freed within a boundary. So, something which remains within a boundary and is free within a boundary. Please spare a moment and think about these two elements. Space is something that has been made room for, something that has been freed within a boundary. And here we are urged to look at the idea of boundary slightly differently. Boundary is not at which something stops. So, generally we think of, when we say boundary, we think of a rope that perhaps is placed around a field and say that that is the boundary, and if you cross that boundary you can score 4 or 6 in a cricket match, and so on. In football, if you go beyond the boundary you are out, and so on. But this idea of sports, idea of boundary that prevails in sports, and idea of boundary that the way it can be understood in philosophy can be very different. So, here what he is saying is that boundary is not at which something stops, all right, but that from which something begins its essential unfolding. So, if this is the boundary, don't look at that which is outside, look at that which is inside the boundary. And inside the boundary, what happens is that something which is inside the boundary begins its essential unfolding. So, inside the boundary, the essence unfolds. Space allowed by the bridge contains intervening spaces. So, the space around the bridge, the space of the bridge and space around the bridge contains intervening spaces. So, approach to the bridge itself, and then as you move out, then there are banks on either side, and then there is landscape around the bridge. So, all of that can be called intervening spaces, and these intervening spaces are measurable, they are in 3 dimensions, and they can be seen as near, far. So, if you are on this side of the bridge, this bank is near, the other bank is far, and this way the whole space around the bridge can be expressed. Numerical magnitude cannot be the ground of the essence of spaces and locales. So, as I was saying earlier, that when we try to understand bridge and understand it from the perspective of measured dimensions, like how heavy it is, or how long it is, or how broad it is, and how many people go through it every day, how high it is, and so on. But they all indicate towards something, but they cannot, or they do not form the ground on which the essence of bridge or essence of spaces and locales can be understood. So, numerical magnitude or numerical ways of expression is not going to help us if we try and understand bridge as a thing, locale or site, or even space. Essence is grounded in things of the type of buildings. So, essence is not in numerical magnitude, essence is in the type of building, which means that if you are trying to find the essence of a house, or essence of a bridge, or essence of a school building, that is how you will have to go about, rather than looking at measurable dimensions in terms of numbers. Let us move forward. Earlier we were trying to understand the relationship between locale and space. Now let us try and understand the relationship between man and space. Now, by staying with things near or far, all right, by thinking about them, we may be much nearer to it and to what it makes room for than someone who uses it differently. So, if you look at this picture, and some of you may recognize that this picture is that of a jali which is present in the logo of Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. Of course, recently there has been controversy on the logo of the institution being changed and this jali not being there. However, those of you who have visited Ahmedabad and who know about the history of this jali, it is taken from a building called Sayyid Siddhi Ahmed Ki Jali, and from there it has moved to the logo of IIM Ahmedabad. Now, if we are thinking about this jali, then we are much closer to this than someone who is actually present around it and going about it without really paying attention to it. So, what Heidegger is saying in his essay is the relationship of man and space happens by staying with things near or far. And if you are far away, then it does not matter. But if you can be near by simply thinking about them, because if you are far away thousands of kilometers and still you are thinking about it, you can be much closer to it than someone who is going about it in a very close proximity and yet not thinking about it. So, that kind of relationship exists between man and space. Another aspect of the relationship between man and space is that spaces open up by letting man dwell. So, if we dwell in a space, okay, and when we say dwell, we must understand the entire impact of or entire essence of the idea of dwelling, that when we dwell in a place means we are brought to peace, we are sparing ourselves in our essence, and dwelling includes building. So, when we are dwelling, we are also building, and so this entirety of meaning that comes to us when we think of dwelling is something that we must keep in mind when we inhabit spaces. So, when he says that spaces open up by letting man dwell. So, when we dwell in a classroom, or when we dwell in a house, or when we dwell on a bridge, what happens is the spaces of these built things or these structures open up. They start talking to us. They start contributing to who and what we are building. So, spaces open up if they let man dwell. So, that is where it is significant for architects and the field of architecture that the spaces you create must let man dwell, because only if it lets man dwell, the spaces will open up and it will do the real building instead of building in the sense of only construction and cultivation. In dwelling, mortals pervade and persist through spaces. So, if you dwell in the real sense in spaces, what happens is we pervade and we persist through spaces. So, if I am in this classroom and if I am dwelling in while I am here and while I am taking this lecture, I pervade in this space, I persist through this space, and by going through spaces, we also sustain them. So, we sustain these spaces. This building, this classroom becomes a classroom if we persist through it. This institution, IIT Kanpur, becomes a great IIT Kanpur or great educational institution because the students and the teachers and all who live here, they persist, they pervade through these spaces of this institution. So, if those who are living here, if this building, this structure, this landscape, if it allows people to dwell here, these spaces open up, they become what they are supposed to become, and in the process, they are also sustained. So, let me repeat, spaces open up by letting man dwell. In dwelling, mortals pervade and persist through spaces. By going through spaces, we sustain them. Let us move forward. We were talking of admitting and installing the fourfold and them as double space making. So, we were saying, and then we can say it again, that Locale admits and installs the fourfold by entering the site and dividing it into spaces. So, initially we have seen what is the meaning of becoming a site for fourfold, and then once you become the site for view in the sense locale. So, first locale allows a site to gather fourfold, and then once it allows the site to gather fourfold, gathering and then do what? So, once you gather, you admit the fourfold and you install the fourfold. Okay, and you do that by entering the site and dividing it into spaces. So, admitting and installing and then divide it into spaces. And when we say divide it into spaces, it can mean, I mean, architects will have to interpret it in their own way, but dividing it means if it is a school or if it's a college or it's a house, it will be divided into classrooms, faculty rooms, library and so on. If it is a house, it will be divided into living room, dining room, bedroom and so on. So, and then each one of them will have its own version of fourfold. So, you have to admit the fourfold and install the fourfold in its own way as appropriate to different spaces. So, as double space making, locale becomes a shelter or a house for the fourfold. So, when you admit the fourfold and install the fourfold, what you do is you make the locale a house for the fourfold, and it is about housing. See, once we read about housing, when we were discussing intimate spaces, we said that mind is housing of memory. Here, it is the through this double space making, through this admitting and installing, what we are doing is we are making locale a house for the fourfold. So, this making of the house for fourfold is happening through this double space making of admitting and installing. Building is founding and joining of spaces. So, once you have made these spaces, you have created these spaces, first you have a site, and then in this site you admit and install fourfold, and then you divide this site into different parts, and you do through this double space making, what you do is you create many spaces. So, through this double space making and through dividing the site into spaces, you create a number of spaces, and then when you actually do building as an act, building as construction and building as cultivation, what you do is you found means create these spaces and you join these spaces. So, building actually means founding and joining of these spaces. So, locale admits and installs the fourfold by entering the site and dividing it into spaces. So, dividing it into spaces is like founding the spaces, and then once you found these spaces, you join the spaces. So, founding and joining of spaces is actually building in sense of cultivation and construction. It is the building which produces things as locales. Please understand that buildings produces things as locales. What are locales? Locales allow things to become a site to gather fourfold. So, right from the first sentence, we are using these three words in the same sentence in the same way, and we have come to this stage, and here again we are going back to the first sentence to understand what do they mean. So, building produces, so building as an activity of cultivation and construction, it produces things, all right. Thing, if you remember thing means gathering of gathering of the landscape, gathering of the earth around the locale. So, building produces things as locales. And what are locales? Locales are those that allow the fourfold to be gathered at a site. So, building produces things as locales. Please reflect on it and try and understand, because it may have a deep impact on the way you create designs for your building and your clients. Building is closer to the essence of space than geometry or mathematics. So, if you recollect the first sentence in this slide, that Locale admits and installs the fourfold by entering the site and dividing it into spaces. So, building is closer to the idea of spaces. Okay, site is divided into spaces, and then those spaces are joined and founded and joined. So, building, the activity of building is actually closer to the idea of space than geometry or mathematics. So, when we study building, we generally study science, we study mathematics, we study geometry, and we do measurement and things like that. We do all the time. Of course, you have to do all that. But if you try to understand the essence of building, then the essence of building is closer to these space than the measuring part of it, which is geometry or mathematics. So, this is something that is equally important to understand, that which is the essence of building and the essence of space. Let us move forward. Now, building receives the directive from oneness of the fourfold to erect locales. Now, building as an activity of construction, it has to move in certain direction. It has to have a design, then it has to be made, constructed, it has to find a form, and then that form gets constructed over a period of time with material and with plan and with surfaces and mass and so on. So, it has to come together and build a structure. But building receives the directive from oneness of the fourfold to erect locales. To make a simple form is fine, but for a building to erect or become a locale, when we say locale, it means locale is a site which gathers fourfold. So, for a building to become a locale, it receives its direction from oneness of the fourfold. So, if as an architect you are aware of that oneness of the fourfold, it will direct you that this is how you must make a building so that it can become a locale. Building takes over from the fourfold for measuring of spaces in locales. So, once it receives direction, it takes over from the fourfold. So, you need fourfold only for the direction. Okay, once you have received the direction, then the building activity of construction and planning, etc., will take over, and then it will do all the measuring and all the guidelines so that locales can be constructed as per the demands of utility and strength. And then the edifices guard and preserve the fourfold. So, through this activity of building, what you create are the edifices, and these edifices actually guard and preserve the fourfold. So, actually they are allowing fourfold to dwell by guarding and preserving them. So, essentially when you are building, you are actually creating edifices that guard and preserve the fourfold. So, fourfold preserving is the simple essence of dwelling, and genuine building houses this unfolding. So, the simple essence of dwelling. So, I mean, we have seen many meanings and understanding of dwelling, but the simplest essence of dwelling is nothing but preserving the fourfold. If your building can preserve the fourfold, that is the simple essence of dwelling. And if the house is genuine, if the building that you have created is in alignment with this thing, locale and site, then that building will house this unfolding. And only if it houses this unfolding, someone who is living in that house using that building can discover the essence and of dwelling and can actually dwell. Let us move forward. So, building lets people dwell. If a building is building in the real sense, it will let people dwell. Now, Heidegger goes further and he talks about the Greek word techne or tikto. Both are, one is older, one is relatively less older. So, techne and tikto. And he says that the meaning of this word is to bring forth or to produce. It also means to let appear, to let appear, to allow something to come to light, to allow something to grow out of earth and move towards sky, to let something come to light, to bring forth or to produce. That is the word for techne. That is the meaning of the word techne. Now, this word techne will remind you of the word technology. If you remember, in one of the lectures, we were discussing Heidegger's essay, Question Concerning Technology. And in that essay, we have said that techne is something similar to poiesis, and poiesis is bringing forth into light. So, this is also something similar, and in this when he mentions the word techne in the sense of building dwelling thinking, what he is saying is that perhaps there is a technology behind it. There is a technology behind dwelling, there is a technology behind building, and that technology, the ultimate purpose of that technology or the essence of that technology must be to bring forth or to let appear. And that perhaps architects must learn and understand, so that their buildings let people dwell. कितना मिनट और है? So then he moves forward. Essence of erecting building is neither in architecture. So he is now coming to the activity of building, the task of erecting a building. All right, and he is saying that essence of erecting a building is not in architecture. It does not reside in architecture. It does not reside in engineering construction. It does not even reside in the combination of the two. If you remember, when we were discussing architecture as an art form, and we were saying that on one side it is not an art, other side we were saying it is always an art. On one side we were saying it is an engineered product, on other side we are saying it is not at all an engineered product. What Heidegger is saying, that essence of erecting a building is neither in architecture nor in engineering construction. It is neither, it is in neither, and it is not even in the combination of two. All right. So, essence is somewhere else, and that somewhere else is essence of building is in letting dwell. So, building becomes a building, a house becomes a house, a school becomes a school if it lets its users, if it lets the people who stay in that house dwell. And only in dwelling the essence of building unfolds. So, you are successful as an architect only if your building lets people dwell, and only if we are capable of building, only if we are capable of dwelling, only then we can build. So, our capability to build depends on our capability to dwell. If we cannot dwell, we cannot build, and only if we dwell, we can build. So, this not so much dichotomy, but this relationship between building and dwelling is something that we must appreciate and understand. If you remember, in the early lectures on building dwelling, we were exploring various possible relationships between building and dwelling. That building and dwelling has relationship of means and end. We also explored that building contains dwelling or dwelling contains building. Then we also saw a possibility that building plus dwelling leads to thinking, and several others. But now we have reached, after so many lectures, that the relationship between building and dwelling is that only if we are capable of dwelling, we can build. So, the real sense of building can happen only if we have dwelt in our buildings. Let us move forward. What is the state of dwelling in our age? So, today we are living in a modern civilization where technology is playing a big role. In such a scenario, what is the state of dwelling? Lack of housing is not the plight of dwelling. So, if we, I mean, everybody does not own a house, and you see government projects which says that this year we will build so many lakhs of houses for poor and so on. But is just not having enough number of houses, is that the plight? Proper dwelling of plight as per Heidegger is much older than this scarcity. So, this scarcity is not really the plight, plight is something else. Mortals forever search for the essence of dwelling, and that they have to learn to dwell. So, all the time we are searching, are we really living a good life? Are we dwelling in this building? And every time we think of, okay, now we have to live differently so that we live a more fulfilling life. We have to always keep learning to dwell. And this is, in his view, the real plight rather than the scarcity that there are not enough houses. So, man's homelessness, he says, lies in the fact that he does not think it as a plight. He does not think that homelessness is a plight. He does not think that even though he has a home, he is not dwelling in that home. He does not think that that is his plight. And he says, Heidegger says, that as soon as man gives thought to his homelessness, it is no longer a misery. So, moment man starts thinking that he is homeless, moment he starts thinking what he should do about it if he is homeless, suddenly he realizes that it is no longer a misery, and he actually start perhaps moving towards dwelling. So, mortals can try on their own to bring dwelling to the fullness of its essence. So, mortals or human beings, you have to try on your own and bring dwelling to the fullness of its essence. So, you have to dwell, you have to understand what is the meaning of dwelling, and you have to start dwelling. On their own you have to do, because it is it's not the responsibility of architect or the government or anybody else to bring the essence of dwelling to you. You have to do it yourself. Mortals will accomplish this when they build out of dwelling and think for the sake of dwelling. So, this is not so much a prescription, but a direction, an indication, a gesture given by Heidegger, that mortals will accomplish this. Mortals or human beings can accomplish this fullness of existence and fullness of essence through dwelling when they build out of dwelling. So, those who are building buildings or those who are building edifices, only if they build out of dwelling, and when they think for the sake of dwelling, only then we will be able to accomplish this. And what is this? Fullness of our existence and fullness of our essence. So, this is how Heidegger has approached this whole idea of building, dwelling and thinking. There is also a minor critique of it, which I will refer to, and that is an article written which is very interestingly and beautifully titled, Building, Dwelling, Not Thinking. So, it is not building, dwelling, thinking, it is saying building, dwelling, not thinking. And that is happening because mindlessly construction is happening across the world, and the focus has become not so much on people, but on places. So, everybody talks of the places, that how places need to be constructed, they need to be built, how they need to look, not so much on the people who will inhabit those spaces, people who will live those spaces, people who will dwell on these spaces. And here what happens is fetishization of vernacular typologies. So, in this essay, Building, Dwelling, Thinking, Heidegger mentions a farmhouse located in a black forest. You can see the picture on the slide. It gives a picture of his house in black forest. So black forest farmhouse is mentioned in Heidegger's essay Building Dwelling Thinking. And what happens is, builders and architects take that mention very seriously, and they say that if this is the landscape, if this is the location, if it is a rural area, then a certain type of building can be built here. If it's another geography, another type of building can be built here, and it is not possible to shift these typologies, which means that for a certain geography, a certain typology of building is applicable and possible. Now this fetishization happens, and architects and builders become very, very rigid and very close to it. But here I must, of course, Heidegger himself has said that our reference to the Black Forest farm in no way means that we should or could go back to building such houses. Rather, it illustrates by a dwelling that has been how it was able to build. So 200 years back, how people have built, it is only for illustration purpose that he has mentioned a farmhouse in Black Forest. It is to be understood in its essence and not in its not an instrumental reading of his essay. So instrumental reading of Heidegger leads to subjugation of dwelling activity to dwelling building. So dwelling building becomes more important rather than dwelling activity. And here one of the best example is the buildings of Le Corbusier. Le Corbusier, you see the kind of buildings he has made in Chandigarh are not at all connected with local geography. They represent engineer aesthetic, they represent his own view of life and world, and therefore it is a great refutation of this fetishization of vernacular typologies. So with this lecture we come to the end of a discussion on this essay Building, Dwelling and Thinking by Martin Heidegger. I hope I was able to make it clear and simpler, because the essay itself is rather dense and difficult. I also hope you enjoyed the lecture. Thank you very much.